Hiya, Billy from Blind Spot Gear. It is a bleak and dreary day here in Scotland. It is blowing a hoolie and the rain is coming down. So what better thing to do than go have a chat with Seamus McGarvey, world-renowned cinematographer. He shot films like Atonement and Karenina, the Avengers, Godzilla, the list goes on. So it's going to be great to hear his thoughts on cinematography and the art of filmmaking. We're also live on Kickstarter with the Tower Light, so after the interview, make sure you click on the link and check it out.
Well, I'd like to just find out, how, because before you had, millions to play with in productions, how did you start off? Where did you kind of...
Well, I started off as a stills photographer, actually.
Right.
Started off in Armagh, Northern Ireland, and I just had a little camera, and I decided that I wanted to process my own films in black and white. Had a little darkroom, and it was just that magical zone where I really got the bug for photography.
So from photography, where was your first break? How did you kind of make the step?
Well, starting out, I went to film school. I had no real interest in filmmaking per se when I was growing up in Armagh. I just had a stills camera, but an art teacher, Declan Ford at school, gave me a Super 8 camera and said, why don't you just try making something with this? And I went out with this little Super 8 camera and made a portrait of the town, Armagh. But at my interview, because that was one of the prerequisites of the interview, that I supply a film, a short 3-minute film. But I had no idea about film, and particularly because I've been using a stills camera, I'd been taking stuff on the horizontal and the vertical. So at my interview, I suddenly had this horrifying epiphany when the cathedral in Armagh suddenly appeared as a lateral image because I turned the camera to fit in the spires. And I suddenly had this realization that there it was, a horizontal format. I think sometimes people approach lighting with a very formulaic approach, and actually the light in the reel, here we are in a beautiful room with the light ebbing and flowing, but this is the light of a window. And natural light and the way it spills hotter in the background is wonderful to look at and learn from. The great Chris Menges told me that when he was working with Stephen Frears, Frears was like, where should we put the camera? And Menges was like, to put the actor by the window. There you go. There's a lovely chiaroscuro and beautiful Vermeer light coming through the window. Yeah. Just work with the real light, and that's been an education to me. And also not to apply formulaic approaches to ratios. Backlight is a technique I rarely use. I tend to now do what's happening in this room. There's a key light, and then the background is lit on the shadow side, so that gives you the relief instead of the backlight, which immediately signals a lamp.
You got to have some kind of motivation for it, otherwise you're... So that's quite interesting you mentioning Chris Menges there, because he's been a kind of hero of mine as well, because of Locale and the stuff he's shot is just stunning. So I know you're quite a young cinematographer. High fidelity.
I was one day. Look at the legacy of the film world all over me.
But High Fidelity, and you must have been...
I was in my 20s and when I shot High Fidelity.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of interested because I've had Douglas, my father. Yeah. So if I'm looking at a script or a bit of prep, and suddenly, how am I going to do this? I've got a mentor to kind of phone up and ask questions. Was that something you had, or?
It was actually, and I had Chris Menges was a great mentor of mine and is still, and also Jack Cardiff, the great Jack Cardiff, was somebody that I called a lot, and he used to come here to Edinburgh and he visited and stayed with us on a number of occasions. He was just such an incredible, he's still my favourite cinematographer of all time, Jack Cardiff. I just love the verve and artistic abandon of his work, and it was genuinely radical approaches in the days of Technicolor when Natalie Kalmus and the Technicolor company themselves were horrified at what he was doing to the torturing their stock as they saw it. But of course the legacy of that is this great innovative work, and from Black Narcissus to the Red Shoes and beyond.
Didn't he get the job because he was talking about painting?
Yeah.
He went to the interview and then just talked about painting the whole time.
Yeah. And he was an artist. He was a very brilliant artist and a great photographer, but he loved studying art. And I think to any aspirant cinematographer, aspiring cinematographer, I would say just look at paintings, look at art, immerse yourself in art and music. I mean, all these arts fuse and surface in your own way, personal way of looking.
Yeah.
You know, look at other movies, but don't mock or emulate just for the
sake of it.
To make facsimiles. You know, let the art infuse your own way of looking.
Yeah, well, that's the joy of cinema. It really is a melting pot of art. Everything kind of comes together and it just kind of comes out and looking at its own little form. But some people like to know every technological thing about a camera and about its sensor and about grip equipment. Some people are much more of a fine art background.
Yeah.
Some people are much more social. You know, Haxel Wexler.
Yeah.
He was always a social cinematographer. Do you kind of fall into a place, or is it different hats for different jobs, or?
It is really. I mean, I like all aspects of filmmaking. The one thing that I'm not that obsessed by is the how. You know, I'm more interested in why. In when I'm thinking about cinematography, and I would urge any cinematographer not to kind of slaver over technology. I mean, there is great technologies. Your own invention, for instance, is great. All these things are hops along the path towards improving our art form and making it easier. And but when people kind of labour over pixels and you know how many K a particular camera has, I think you just get lost down a one-way track to oblivion. And you know, I think that much more important is the things that never change, which is light, character, the issues in documentary that you're talking about, what you're trying to portray, the way of an actor or an actress moves around a room. All those things are much more interesting to look at than how many pixels a camera has.
No, I agree. And I think that's it's good to hear you saying that, because it's always secondary. Technology is always secondary. In kind of pre-production, how do you get onto the same page as the director, or what's your kind of process you go through?
Well, I'm a different cinematographer with every single director, and that's the kind of the scary thing, because you wonder, how come I might be able to migrate that far? But my favourite way of working is to sit down way ahead of time, usually off the clock, and just get to know a director, and because you're in service of a script, and usually when you read a script, it has some sort of photographic centre to it. It has a signature that's buried within it that needs to be mined, but it needs to be mined alongside the director's vision. You can't just willy-nilly kind of emboss your imprint over it, because that will not sit well, and an audience will intuit that when they watch a film. So the best way is, and I love particularly working with Joe Wright, with whom I've done 5 films, and on Atonement and on Anna Karenina, there was a great pooling of ideas. There was a sort of a democracy of ideas with the director, the cinematographer, myself, the designer, and costume and makeup. We're all around, and producers, we're all around the table, and ideas are constantly put into the centre and absorbed or discarded according to what's appropriate. And Joe would like a sheepdog kind of steer those in the right direction, and gradually you have this organic mutating idea that gradually gets strained into something that ultimately becomes quite strong. And it becomes quite strong because it's been cogitated over, it's been chewed over and thought about, and thought is really important, and it shows, because it's like cooking, or it's like anything. If it's all done with taste and with the right direction, obviously it shifts and it migrates as you go, but it makes for a more satisfying cinematographic meal at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, whilst watching Anna Karenina, it felt like every department was at the top of their game. You know, it's just... Well,
Joe is a great guardian in that regard, in terms of steering everybody towards excellence. And I just loved working on that film because it wasn't supposed to be like that. It was supposed to be actually a little bit more conventional, going to Russia to palaces, and then suddenly the money fell through.
Right.
And it had to be totally reconceived as a theatrical piece. Right. And Joe and his designer, Sarah Greenwood, came up with this incredible, radical solution to try to save the film. Yeah. And it actually worked for the film. And allowed me as a cinematographer just to go, okay, throw out the rule book. Now I can use theatrical sources. I can treat it like a theatre play with dimming, with changes. I can go from tungsten candlelight to spotlight. I can do all this stuff that traditional period photography, cinematography doesn't allow for, because it would stick in the craw of veracity of the period. But here was something that you just go, well, we're on a merry-go-round of cinematographic merry-go-round, like do whatever the hell you like. Well, what it did was those parameters were set in. We were suddenly said we can only afford 2 stages at Shepperton. So yeah, basically you've got to make this one stage work and be modular. Like these flats turn on their side and now you've got a different set, or by the dimming of lights you've gone from a landscape to a detail, and that happens literally by adjusting 2 faders on a lamp. So it was great to have to think outside the box. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it was fun to do.
As one leads to the other. I mean, I think Birdman had a lot of looking at Anna Karenina, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, so. Well, Chivo, the cinematographer of that, is a mate, and I know that he and Iñárritu love continuous takes. Children of Men was a great example of that.
Fantastic.
That was just spellbinding. The several of the long takes in that film that have hidden like rope. They have hidden edits there.
Is there like a special club of 5-minute takes? You're gonna.
I don't know. Weirdly, I argued that take, if that's the one you're referring to on Atonement, the Steadicam take on the beach, I really thought when Joe described this to me, because we were initially, it was this 7 pages of little scenelets that were all occurring, and we were going to do it over 3 days. And when we got to the location, realised that the tide was in for like most of the day, that where we wanted to stage it, we only had like 2-hour windows in the day, and actually the afternoon in the days that we were supposed to shoot was the best time to shoot it. So Joe just said, look, I want to do it all in 1 take. And I was like, oh no. I thought it was going to be a flatulent peacock of a shot that had no place in the film. Up until that point, we'd really finally storyboarded every single shot in the film, and I thought, no, we're just going to have this drifting Steadicam all over the place. But we had this amazing first AD who had worked on Gandhi, and just marshalling all those extras. It's not a CG shot. I mean, there are 1,000 extras in that, all in costume. And we planned it for days and days and days in advance, and then we had a day's rehearsal the day before, and then when the tide went out, the light happened, and suddenly we were off, and we got 3 takes at it. And when I watch the film now, I mean, firstly I'm nervous watching it because I know all the near misses of disaster that could have happened. It was a very expensive shot to pull off with the possibility of it not working. But I kind of agree with Joe now. He wanted this sort of ebbing between objective and subjective camera to
Well, I think the point in that it sits in the film's perfect, and that's probably when you're saying that the flatulent peacock shot. When it doesn't sit within the film, it becomes that.
Right.
But it felt like a perfect time for it just to take you.
Well, Joe was right. I mean, the great thing was I think it got me the Oscar nomination, so I'm glad I didn't argue too strongly against it.
Yeah.
You need to have a riff to get you need a sunset, a waterfall, or a big long shot to get an Oscar nomination.
Exactly. Well, Billy Williams with Gandhi. So, okay, so that's, I mean, obviously a bit of pre-production. We've kind of just gone on to some other things. I guess another thing I'd like to touch on, which people might find interesting, is the variants of films you do. Because people starting out, they go from music videos to documentary to corporate. And like you said, you're a different cinematography for every job, but I mean, how do you approach doing something like talk about Kevin to the Avengers, which are two beasts?
They're
different.
very, very different beasties. On the outset, I mean, I love jumping between low budget films and the bigger budget. The bigger budget films are creatively very satisfying. They're very different exercise. It's like cinematographic Pilates, that you're exercising a whole different series of muscles but I was desperate to work with Lynn Ramsey, and we've been friends for years, and then when Alvin, her regular cinematographer, wasn't available, I got the chance to shoot that film, and it was a very low budget film, next to no money, but I think it's one of the nicest films I've shot, and certainly had the greatest collaboration with Lynn, who is a cinematographer herself as well as a director, and it was just lovely to have that cinematographic rapport with somebody who, Joe's very like that too. But weirdly, I get very nervous when I approach a film set, like the Avengers, for instance. We shot in New Mexico, and I'd drive to work in the morning, and I'd go past these phalanxes of huge juggernauts and trucks, and my heart would be beating, because you just think, oh my God, the responsibility, the money that is being spent on this. But then you arrive and you're on the set, and actually it's exactly the same as We Need to Talk About Kevin, or The War Zone, or Butterfly Kiss, or other lower budget films that I've done. As soon as that clapperboard goes, you're right in the inner sanctum of creativity, and it's as silent and peculiar and intimate as the big grandiose films. And I suppose if you can keep your head, because the responsibility is enormous. I mean, just in terms of the organisational skills that are required, we've maybe got 4 units on the Avengers. We had an A camera, B camera, C camera, a second unit with 3 cameras, an aerial unit, a model unit, a visual effects unit, and you're the boss of all those, so you have to keep an eye and see their footage coming in and corral that. So there's a lot more to think about, but at the same time, there's similar complexities in the smaller stuff, working with Tilda Swinton and John C. Reilly and Lynn on We Need to Talk About Kevin. No less complex, but in a different way. You're looking at emotional complexity and through a lens, and that's something that takes time and takes acuity and attention.
Yeah, and I guess they're all just as rewarding as each other. Like you said, the Pilates, or the getting into the complex characters. Yeah,
they're very, very different, and I think that again, it's the improvisational aspect of it. When you've got no money to make a film, you work with 1 or 2 lights. On We Need to Talk About Kevin, we had 1 HMI for windows, and we had a small package for the indoors. It was very much like making a documentary, and in fact, in that, we shot a lot with a Canon.
I've never had an HMI in a documentary.
Right, okay, well, but we had, I shot a lot of it on a 5D Mark II, and to do the sort of improvisational flashback moments, and they were all available light, or I used a little mag light to light a lot of those things in red light. I just put a red gel on a mag light, or we shot in available light. We did this scene that could not have been shot. It reminded me of the stuff I used to do with Derek Jarman, and that we did a pre-shoot, which is very common these days on low budget films, with Tilda and John C. Reilly, where we went down to a pub in New York, and we had to do a flashback moment when they had Tilda and her husband had a lovely idyllic time.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, we'll have a few drinks before we do this, what is essentially a test. So we went and had a couple of drinks, and then suddenly there was this deluge outside in New York. I mean, really like a biblical downpour. Yeah. And Tilda was like, come on. So I had the camera around my neck. There was no even Zacuto finder or anything. It was just like, literally, let's go out there with a 50mm 1.2, wide open, 800 ASA. Off we went, and they careered down the street, and they were running, and they're spinning in the water, and the deluge is coming down. It's like incredible, like God-given wet down.
Yeah.
And the footage, I think it's the best footage I've ever shot in my life, because it was done with such creative abandon and fun, and we all had a laugh, and it captured the moment perfectly. But it was because we were able to go, okay, there you go. It reminded me of the Super 8 days when we used to just run around Dungeness in the shingle with Derek, again with Tilda. But she was laughing about it, that it reminded her of that.
Yeah.
It was like Derek was there, his spirit was with us. The rest of the film was shot very precisely using anamorphic, shot on Fujifilm 35 with old anamorphic lenses, C-series from the 60s. Yeah, so there were beautiful aberrations and mess-ups at the edges, no perfection.
That's beautiful. Everyone has their own character.
Yeah, they are. They're like little orphans, each one, aren't they?
Just
bad children,
giving them a home.
I know, they all got their own attributes of colour, of character, of halation. I didn't use any diffusion, but any time a light hits Tilda's face, I mean, she's phosphorescently beautiful anyway, but the glow of those lenses, I love to see.
Beautiful. Okay, well, I think that's covered most things. I guess probably the final thing is advice. I remember when I was at film school, I phoned you up one day and kind of said, give me some advice. I'm desperate to kind of figure out how to do this. So, I mean, you told me a few things there, but any just advice people starting out?
Well, I would say, obviously follow your passion. Like, I think to go back to the idea of be inspired by the epic and the everyday is the big thing for me. It's just to look with an artist's eye. I mean, art and commerce are sort of, and cinema in Hollywood especially, it's sometimes seen as a bad word. And art is actually the best word that we as cinematographers can hold on to. It is the centerpiece of cinema, art. And so look at everything with an artist's eye and bring it into your work. Look at magazines, look at TV. There is inspiration to be had from anything, nature. Go for big walks and look at how the light changes when the sun goes down, and you can see lilac in the shadows. Look at the morning light compared to the crepuscular dusk. Just see things, register them, and bring them back into your work. And that way your work will expand yours and other people's horizons cinematographically.
No, I agree. I think one of the things you told me back then was live cheap as well.
Live cheap, definitely. Did I tell you that?
You told me to live cheap.
Oh no.
I think I moved into an abandoned building the day after.
Yeah, or find a rich girlfriend.
Those are the two options.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Not at all, Billy. Good luck with everything with the Scorpion light. It's absolutely amazing that you've done this, and good luck with everything. I look forward to using them on set and on my next project.
Fantastic. Yeah, we look forward to seeing how what you managed to get out of them.
Okay, well, I'll send you a picture from the set of them in action.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Brilliant.